there, welcome to another power session. We're doing surface area today, part 1, the basics. There's going to be a part 2 that involves changing the dimensions of these 3D shapes. So in this session you're going to learn 1, what surface area is, and 2, how to find the surface area of a basic 3D shape. Alright, so you might be saying, wait a second, area, that's 2D, 3D is volume, right? Well, it's getting a little tricky now because now we're doing surface area. So one-dimensional reminder, straight lines in length, that's the distance, usually of perimeter. Then we have two-dimensional, that is usually area, flat shapes. And then three-dimensional is when you give that flat shape some depth and suddenly you give it that space. Okay, so now we're kind of working in 2 dimensions at once. We're looking at a 3-dimensional shape, but we're finding the area of the flat shapes that wrap it up, just like a beautiful piece of wrapping paper, perfectly cut so that there's no overlap on a 3D shape. So here's a shape we might be familiar with, right, when we're working with different kinds of volumes. Okay, the surface area formula is right here. And I would tell you, honestly, don't even bother worrying about how to memorize that, okay? They're saying, look, take 2 times the width times the height, and the length times the width, and the length times the height, okay? But what they're doing there is they're just adding up the front and the back, the side, and the top and the bottom, okay? Width times height is going to be right here, width times height. So those are your sides. You're going to have 2 sides. And then length times width is going to be the bottom and the top, here and here, and then length times height is going to be the front and the back. So you can see what we do is we unwrap that beautiful present and find that surface area. Okay, so here's a cylinder, triangular prism. Remember, a prism is a shape that gets stretched out, and I like to think of it as a stack of triangle pancakes, maybe in this case that tipped over. Cones, pyramids, all right, and spheres. Those are going to be the common shapes that we work with. Now, don't forget to use your formula sheet if that helps you, but again, know how to apply those formulas. So now I want you to picture it. Look at the smashed 2D version of this shape and guess the original 3D shape. So I took these slides from this website, or you can just Google 3D nets and you'll get some websites where you can see some different kinds of shapes when they've been flattened out. Okay, so what would this shape be? Now imagine that the gray is just where you would maybe cut out and glue over. In fact, it's interesting, my son had a homework assignment and he had to look at this shape and it was flat, it wasn't built. We had to cut it out, and there were some places where little tabs that we had to tape or glue, and but before he could build it he had to name how many sides there were, how many vertices, how many edges, and what the shape was, and he did surprisingly a pretty good job with that. So you can see this is a pentagonal prism because it's a pentagon, 5 sides, and it got stretched out, so it's maybe a stack of pentagon pancakes, and we can stack it up like this. So this would be our height. Okay, so it can be a little tricky to visualize some of those things. Okay, this one would be a rectangular prism. Okay, it's a rectangle that would be stretched out. Right here, and this is important to look at the base. When you see a bunch of triangles, you're going to have a pyramid most likely, and the base of the pyramid is how you call it. So this would be a square pyramid. Imagine those triangle sides all coming up to meet at a point. Now right here, this one's definitely tricky because that gray, remember, that's just where you're gluing and wrapping something together. Well, imagine you're wrapping that around and gluing that white on top of the gray. That's going to make a cone, and then that circle is going to come up on the bottom and have some tabs to be glued there. Now here we have a triangular pyramid. Now it's a little tricky, but just imagine those 3 outer triangles coming up at a point and touching. This one seems to throw a lot of my students off. Now I know the gray tabs can be a little tricky, but if you were to take a rectangle and wrap it up and close it, it would make a cylinder, right? And then those 2 circles go on the end. And I tell them, imagine you go and you have an empty roll of toilet paper and you cut it and then you try to unwrap it and hold it down. It wants to curl up on you, but keep pushing it down and you would see it makes a rectangle. Okay, so these are the basic shapes that are making up the surface area of these 3D things. So when you look at the formula for the surface area of a cylinder, look, it's going to have you working with the base times the height of that rectangle. Unfortunately, though, one of those is also the circumference of the circle, so it can get a little bit tricky. This one is a prism. It's a triangular prism. It's a triangle that got stretched out. Again, if you imagine wrapping up those rectangle sides, they would all wrap around the triangles. Here's a pentagonal prism right here. A pentagon with the rectangles wrapped all around the sides. And this is another pyramid, okay? It's a hexagonal pyramid, remember, named for its base. So we'd find the area of the hexagon and then add in those triangles. So let's start with this problem. Find the surface area of this Kleenex box. Okay, well, we want to go ahead and it doesn't really matter what order you do it in, but here's what I typically tell my students. It's the little Mrs. Landers trick, Mama L's trick. Top plus bottom plus side plus front plus back. Okay, that helps you kind of keep track of it. So if you want to do, all right, let's say these are our sides, 5 times 4, side times side. So I'll go ahead and put 20. And then we've also got this side, it's 4 times 10. Okay, maybe that was the front and the back. 4 times 10, that's going to be 40. And now top and bottom. 5 times 10. That's going to be 50. And notice each one got its turn to get multiplied twice. 4 times 5, 4 times 10, and 5 times 10. And we add them all up. Top, bottom, side, side, front, back. 50 plus 50 is 100. 20 plus 20 is 40. 40 plus 40 is 80. If you add them all up, you get 220 units. What? Squared or cubed? It's going to be squared because we're finding the area, surface area, 2D flat shapes that wrap around a 3D shape. So we're getting two-dimensional answers. Let's try another one. Now we're going to find the surface area of a pyramid. Now this one's a little bit trickier. With volume, remember, you find the flat pancake, you multiply it by the stack, going straight up through the middle, and then you divide it by 3 because you got to share it with your triplet siblings. Okay. On this one, we're finding, since it's a square pyramid, we're finding that square base and then the 4 triangles that wrap around it. Hopefully you could draw that a little better than I could. Okay, so my square base is 5 times 5 because this edge and this edge is going to give me base times height is 5 times 5, which is 25. Okay, if you want to draw pictures like this, square plus 4 times your triangle, and then write your formulas right below. Like the triangle formula is 1/2 base times height, or base times height chopped in half. And we're just going to multiply that by 4 because that's how many triangles we have. So if you look at just this one triangle right here, 5 is the base and 6 is the height. So what's half of 5 times 6? 5 times 6 is 30. Half of 30 is 15. So that's just one of the sides of my pyramid. Well, 4 sides is going to give me 60. So my base, again, that was 25, my square base, plus my 4 triangular sides is 60. Altogether, the surface area of this shape is 85 inches squared. Last but not least, the surface area of a triangular prism. Remember, if we were to break that one apart, that would be the triangle front and back, and then the sides. 3 sides, okay, because there's this rectangle, and then the one on the bottom. Okay, so you want to say, okay, 2 triangles plus 3 rectangles. Okay, and be careful that your rectangles are all the same size. Sometimes they're not. In fact, they're not in this case, so we have to really watch that. All right, so our front and back are going to be the same. The triangle is going to be 1/2 base times height. So 2 times 1/2, the base of that front is 5, the height is 3. So half of 15 5 times 3 is 15. Half of 15 is 7.5, and then I multiply it by 2 again, so that's going to be 15. That's my front and my back. Now remember, my 3 rectangles, they were all a little bit different. Let's take a look at this one. This is going to be 4 times 8. The other side is also going to be 4 times 8. But the bottom is a little bit wider, 5 times 8. So if you were to picture that, 5 times 8. So instead of having 3 of the same size, I'm going to go ahead and add up 4 times 8. That's 32. Plus another 4 times 8, another 32. And then 5 times 8, 40. And if you add them all up, you get 119 units squared. All right, hopefully that helps you understand surface area a little bit better. Thanks for watching.